What happens when 7 global superstars stop acting like coworkers and start behaving like actual brothers? Tiny habits, silent routines, unplanned moments fans almost missed. From sharing food to fixing each other's clothes, these small BTS actions reveal something bigger than fame, a bond built over more than a decade together.
Number 7. Jin. One of the smallest but most repeated habits inside BTS is how naturally the members feed each other during meals, live streams, and behind-the-scenes content. And no member shows this more consistently than Jin. Fans noticed it years ago during group broadcasts when Jin would casually place food onto another member's plate before serving himself. It sounds insignificant until you realize how often it happens without cameras directly focusing on it. In Korean culture, sharing food already carries social meaning, but inside BTS, it became something closer to family behavior. Jin especially developed a reputation as the member who constantly checked whether everyone else had eaten. During travel content and documentaries, he was frequently seen grilling meat for younger members while barely touching his own plate at first. In multiple episodes of Run BTS and backstage footage from tours, Jin instinctively prepared food portions for others without being asked. The important detail is consistency. These were not staged emotional moments built for fans. They appeared randomly over years of content, even in chaotic situations where nobody was trying to create sentimental scenes. During BTS's early dorm years, the group often spoke about surviving on limited budgets and eating together constantly because they had almost no privacy. Shared meals became one of the few stable routines in their exhausting trainee schedules. Jin, being one of the oldest members, naturally slipped into caretaker habits. RM once mentioned that Jin often handled cooking responsibilities in the dorm because he was reliable under pressure. Jungkook also repeatedly described Jin as someone who quietly takes care of people without making it obvious. What makes the habit feel deeply personal is how unconscious it became. In many live streams, Jin would interrupt himself mid-conversation just to hand food to another member automatically. There was no dramatic music, no emotional speech, no announcement, just instinct. That kind of behavior usually develops after years of living together closely. Psychologists often describe family bonds through repetitive care patterns rather than grand gestures. BTS accidentally documented those patterns for over a decade. Even during international schedules, members frequently waited for each other before eating, another habit rooted in their trainee years, when schedules were physically brutal and meals were one of the few moments they could share normally. Jin's behavior during those moments revealed an older brother dynamic that extended far beyond official group roles. One example fans still reference happened during backstage content where Jin quietly peeled shrimp for another member while continuing a completely unrelated conversation. Nobody reacted dramatically because for BTS, these actions were already normal. That normalcy is exactly why fans noticed it. Family habits usually look invisible from the inside. Another revealing moment came during Bon Voyage travel series episodes. While the group explored unfamiliar countries, Jin constantly monitored whether everyone had food, warm clothes, or basic necessities before relaxing himself. In psychological terms, this mirrors caregiving patterns common among siblings who spend long periods raising or supporting one another in stressful environments. BTS trained together during financially uncertain years under a relatively small company at the time. Shared struggle accelerated emotional dependency inside the group. By the time global fame arrived, many of these habits were already deeply built into their daily interactions. Even staff members occasionally referenced how the members naturally operated like people who had lived together forever. The feeding habit also says something important about trust. Eating is one of the most vulnerable everyday human activities.
People rarely interrupt their own meals repeatedly to care for others unless emotional closeness feels completely natural. And in BTS, fans observed that behavior constantly without prompting. The group rarely verbalized these dynamics directly, but their routines exposed them anyway. Jin never needed dramatic speeches to look protective. The evidence sat quietly in hundreds of unnoticed moments around dinner tables, backstage waiting rooms, hotel breakfasts, and exhausted late-night schedules after concerts. Tiny gestures became emotional proof, and the deeper you look into BTS's daily habits, the clearer it becomes that this group stopped functioning like ordinary coworkers a very long time ago. One member, though, turned emotional support into something even more unexpected.
Number 6, J-Hope. BTS spent so many years moving together through airports, award shows, rehearsals, and live broadcasts that some of their interactions started looking less like idol behavior and more like automatic family reflexes. One of the clearest examples is how often J-Hope quietly fixes the members' clothes, accessories, microphones, or hairstyles without interrupting conversations. It happens constantly in backstage footage. A loose collar, a crooked jacket, a disconnected in-ear monitor. Before staff can react, J-Hope is already adjusting it. The reason fans noticed this habit is because it rarely appears performative. Most of the time, he does it while focusing on something else entirely. During interviews, he has been seen brushing lint off members' sleeves mid-conversation. In award show waiting rooms, he adjusted ties and necklaces seconds before cameras rolled. During live performances, he sometimes fixed another member's mic pack while simultaneously preparing for choreography himself. The action is quick, practical, and almost invisible unless viewers pay attention. That subtlety is what makes it revealing. These habits developed after years of functioning in physically demanding environments together. BTS members trained for extremely long hours before debut, often practicing choreography until late at night. In those conditions, the group had to rely heavily on one another because mistakes affected everyone collectively. J-Hope became known internally as one of the members most attentive to performance details. RM and Jungkook have both mentioned in interviews that J-Hope often monitored rehearsals carefully and helped stabilize group energy when schedules became exhausting. That attentiveness extended naturally into everyday behavior. In many behind-the-scenes clips, he notices problems before the person involved realizes it. During concert documentaries, J-Hope frequently checked whether members were ready before stage entrances. Not in a controlling way, more like someone unconsciously making sure everybody is okay. Fans began comparing the behavior to an older sibling adjusting a younger brother's school uniform before leaving home. The comparison stuck because the dynamic genuinely resembled family routines. One memorable example happened during an American interview appearance when J-Hope quietly fixed V's collar while V continued answering questions without even looking down. There was no acknowledgement because the action already felt normal between them. That normality matters. People only allow constant physical adjustments inside close trust boundaries. Another moment happened during airport footage when J-Hope noticed Suga's backpack strap twisting awkwardly and corrected it mid-walk without slowing down. Tiny action, huge emotional implication. Humans develop these automatic support behaviors through long-term cohabitation and repeated daily exposure. BTS accidentally demonstrated those patterns publicly for years. J-Hope's role inside the group became especially noticeable during tense schedules. Other members repeatedly described him as someone who lifts the atmosphere when morale drops. But unlike loud emotional speeches, his support often appeared through practical actions instead. Fixing a mic, straightening a jacket, checking equipment, small forms of reassurance that quietly communicate, "I'm paying attention to you." Even during chaotic tour schedules, those habits never disappeared. In Burn the Stage and other documentaries, J-Hope regularly monitored whether members were physically prepared before performances. At times, he looked more concerned about the group's condition than his own nerves. Fans also noticed how comfortable the members became receiving this care. care. Nobody reacted awkwardly when J-Hope adjusted their clothes because the behavior had clearly existed for years already. That level of comfort usually only exists between relatives, longtime friends, or people who have spent enormous amounts of time together under emotionally intense conditions. BTS often described themselves as family in interviews, but habits like this gave audiences visible evidence instead of just words. And the next member revealed that family bond in an even quieter way by doing almost nothing at all.
Number 5. Suga. Most idol groups fill silence quickly. Interviews, live streams, and variety shows usually demand constant reactions and energy. But BTS developed a very different habit over the years, the ability to sit together quietly without discomfort. And no member represents that dynamic more clearly than Suga. Fans began noticing it during behind-the-scenes documentaries and travel content, where Suga would sit beside the members for long stretches without speaking much at all. What made those moments interesting was the complete lack of awkwardness around him. Nobody pressured him to perform socially. Nobody forced conversation. The members simply accepted his silence as part of the group's normal rhythm. That level of comfort reveals a deeper kind of closeness than non-stop interaction. Psychologists often describe genuine long-term relationships as ones where silence stops feeling threatening. BTS accidentally documented that evolution in real time over more than a decade. During early debut years, the group worked in extremely cramped conditions. Multiple members shared rooms, rehearsed together constantly, traveled together, and had almost no personal privacy. Under those conditions, people either emotionally drift apart or develop unusually high tolerance for each other's natural personalities. BTS moved toward the second outcome. Suga, known for being naturally introverted and emotionally reserved compared to some members, never had to pretend to match everyone else's energy constantly. RM once explained that Suga often communicates care through presence rather than words. That pattern became visible repeatedly across documentaries like Burn the Stage, Break the Silence, and various live streams. One recurring habit fans noticed was how members gravitated toward Suga even during quiet moments. He would sit silently editing music, scrolling his phone, or resting backstage, and another member would casually sit nearby without needing conversation. In normal social environments, extended silence can create pressure. Inside BTS, it started functioning almost like emotional rest. During Bon Voyage travel episodes, there were multiple scenes where members shared long, quiet car rides or meals without trying to entertain each other continuously. Suga especially seemed comfortable existing alongside the group without forcing interaction. That comfort spread to the others too. Jungkook once mentioned that simply being around the members helped him relax, even if nobody talked much. The statement sounded simple, but psychologically it reflected strong emotional security. Humans usually reserve peaceful silence for relationships where they feel fully accepted. Another revealing example happened during backstage concert footage when Suga sat silently recovering energy after a performance, while Jimin eventually sat beside him without speaking. No dramatic conversation followed, no scripted emotional scene. They just shared the same space quietly before returning to work. Fans reacted strongly because the moment felt unusually real compared to heavily edited entertainment content. In another live stream, Suga and RM spent several minutes working independently while barely speaking, yet the atmosphere remained calm instead of uncomfortable. Viewers described the interaction as strangely familiar, less like celebrities broadcasting content, and more like family members existing in the same living room after years together. That distinction matters because many of BTS's strongest family-like habits appear in moments where they are not actively trying to create emotional fan service. Silence became evidence precisely because it looked natural. Suga's role inside BTS also reveals something important about emotional balance within close groups. Every long-term family or team develops unspoken understanding around personality differences. BTS members learned how to read Suga's moods without demanding constant verbal explanation. In return, Suga consistently showed support through reliability rather than emotional dramatics. Members frequently described him as calm during stressful situations and dependable when others needed advice privately. That reliability strengthened trust over time. One small but telling detail appeared repeatedly during group travel content. Members often checked whether Suga was resting comfortably without disturbing him directly. The behavior resembled siblings understanding each other's boundaries through years of coexistence. BTS's dynamic worked because the group stopped treating personality differences as obstacles and instead built routines around mutual understanding. And once a group reaches that level of comfort, even silence starts carrying emotional meaning. But one member expressed family attachment through something even more instinctive, physical closeness nobody inside the group seemed to question anymore.
Number 4. Jimin. Physical closeness inside BTS became so normal over the years that fans sometimes stopped noticing how unusual it actually was. Members leaning against each other during interviews, resting on shoulders backstage, holding on to one another during crowded schedules. These moments happened so often that they turned into background behavior. And no member showed this habit more naturally than Jimin. From the group's earliest years, Jimin developed a reputation for expressing affection physically. But what makes the behavior meaningful is how automatically the other members accepted it. During award shows, airport footage, rehearsals, and live streams, Jimin regularly leaned against whoever stood closest to him without hesitation. Sometimes it was exhaustion after performances. Sometimes it happened during casual conversations. Other times, he simply rested his head on another member while listening quietly. The members almost never reacted like the behavior was unusual. That familiarity tells the real story. Human touch carries enormous psychological significance. Studies on long-term emotional bonding show that comfortable physical contact usually develops only after strong trust and repeated social safety. BTS spent their formative years together under relentless schedules, constant public scrutiny, and intense physical exhaustion. In those conditions, physical reassurance often becomes instinctive. Jimin's behavior revealed how deeply normalized emotional dependence became within the group. One famous example happened during concert documentaries, when exhausted members collapsed backstage after performances. Jimin frequently reached for another member automatically while catching his breath, sometimes without even looking at them directly. In Bring the Soul and Break the Silence, several scenes captured members physically supporting each other after emotionally draining concerts. These weren't exaggerated television moments. Cameras simply documented habits that already existed naturally inside the group. Jungkook once described Jimin as someone who expresses affection openly and checks on people emotionally very carefully. That attentiveness appeared constantly through physical gestures. During live streams, Jimin often adjusted himself closer to members unconsciously, leaning on shoulders or sitting pressed beside them even when space existed elsewhere. Fans noticed because the behavior resembled siblings who stopped thinking about personal boundaries after living together for years. Another revealing detail came from the group's trainee-era stories. BTS members often talked about cramped dorm conditions, where privacy barely existed. Multiple members shared small rooms while practicing for exhausting hours daily. Physical space became communal very quickly. Over time, emotional and physical comfort zones naturally shifted too. By the time BTS reached global fame, the members had already spent nearly a decade functioning inside shared environments. Jimin's constant leaning became visible proof of that familiarity. One especially discussed moment happened during an interview overseas when Jimin instinctively leaned against RM while listening to questions, despite cameras directly in front of them. There was no performative reaction from either member because the action clearly required no conscious thought anymore. Similar moments appeared endlessly across BTS content. Jimin falling asleep against members during travel schedules, leaning on shoulders backstage, grabbing arms during stressful situations, or instinctively moving closer during emotionally heavy conversations. Fans often interpreted these moments as fan service at first, but the consistency across private documentary footage changed that perception. The behavior continued even when cameras captured emotionally exhausting or unglamorous situations. That persistence made the interactions feel authentic. Physical affection also became important during difficult periods for the group. BTS openly discussed burnout, anxiety, injuries, and emotional pressure throughout various documentaries and interviews. During those moments, Jimin frequently acted as one of the members most visibly attached to others physically. Small touches became forms of reassurance. In psychology, repeated nonverbal comfort behaviors often signal emotional security stronger than verbal statements alone. BTS rarely needed dramatic declarations about brotherhood because their body language communicated it constantly. Staff members and interviewers occasionally seemed surprised by how naturally the members occupied each other's personal space. But for BTS, the behavior had already evolved into routine family dynamics long before worldwide attention arrived. And while Jimin showed closeness through touch, the next member revealed family instincts through something even harder to fake, protecting others automatically under pressure.
Number 3. RM. One of the clearest signs BTS stopped functioning like ordinary coworkers is how quickly they defend one another in uncomfortable situations, not with rehearsed speeches or dramatic confrontations, but through immediate instinct. And no member displayed that instinct more consistently than RM. As the group leader, RM spent years acting as BTS's spokesperson during interviews, press conferences, and international appearances. But fans gradually noticed something deeper beneath the official leadership role. Whenever another member looked uncomfortable, confused, or unfairly targeted, RM reacted almost automatically. During Western interviews especially, BTS occasionally faced awkward questions rooted in stereotypes about boy bands, language barriers, or Asian artists in Western media. RM frequently stepped in before tension escalated. One widely discussed example happened during an American interview when a host repeatedly focused on whether BTS members were dating secretly instead of discussing their music. RM redirected the conversation calmly toward their artistic work while keeping the atmosphere professional. Another moment occurred when interviewers overlooked quieter members during English-language promotions. RM regularly created openings for them to speak instead of dominating conversations himself. Those actions mattered because they showed active awareness of the group's emotional balance under pressure. Leadership inside BTS rarely looked authoritarian, it looked protective. The members themselves repeatedly described RM as someone who absorbs pressure first, so others feel safer. Jungkook once explained that RM carried enormous responsibility from the group's earliest years because he communicated with companies, media, and international press while BTS was still fighting for recognition. That role became emotionally demanding as BTS's global fame exploded. Yet, even during stressful schedules, RM consistently monitored how the other members were being treated publicly. Fans noticed a recurring pattern during group interviews. RM often glanced toward members before answering sensitive questions, almost checking whether everyone felt comfortable. In psychology, this kind of hyper-awareness commonly appears in tightly bonded social groups, where one person unconsciously assumes protective coordination responsibilities. BTS's shared trainee years intensified that dynamic. RM debuted as leader while still extremely young, carrying expectations from both the company and the members simultaneously. Over time, protecting the group stopped being a formal responsibility and became instinctive behavior. One revealing backstage moment appeared in a documentary footage when a member blamed himself for a performance mistake. RM interrupted immediately to spread responsibility across the team instead of allowing one person to carry guilt alone. It was a small interaction, but psychologically important. Strong family systems often operate through collective emotional protection rather than individual blame. BTS repeatedly demonstrated that pattern publicly. Another example fans frequently mention happened during exhausting overseas schedules when members struggled physically from lack of sleep and non-stop travel. RM consistently checked whether quieter members had chances to rest or speak during public appearances. He also developed a habit of translating emotional nuance during interviews, making sure international audiences understood the personalities of members who were less fluent in English. That role protected not just communication, but dignity. The strongest evidence of RM's instinctive defense mechanisms often appeared in tiny reactions most viewers missed initially. During chaotic airport crowds, he frequently positioned himself strategically between members and aggressive cameras. During emotionally heavy award speeches, he redirected attention toward the group rather than accepting individual praise comfortably. Even in casual live streams, RM subtly defended members against self-criticism by reframing situations positively before negativity could grow. None of these actions looked dramatic individually. Together, they formed a clear behavioral pattern. BTS also faced periods of massive public criticism throughout their career, especially during their rapid rise internationally. During those moments, RM often became the emotional shield publicly while helping stabilize morale internally. Members later acknowledged how difficult those periods were mentally, yet despite intense pressure, the group rarely turned against one another publicly, something remarkably uncommon in long-running entertainment groups. RM's leadership played a major role in maintaining that unity. Family bonds often reveal themselves most clearly during stress, not comfort. BTS survived years of criticism, exhaustion, injuries, media pressure, and extreme fame while remaining unusually cohesive, and RM's instinct to protect the members immediately whenever tension appeared became one of the strongest visible signs of that closeness. But one member expressed family loyalty in a completely different way, by remembering the smallest details nobody expected him to notice.
Number 2. V. Families often recognize love through memory, not birthdays or major milestones. Tiny details most people forget instantly. Favorite snacks, nervous habits, expressions that reveal hidden emotions. Inside BTS, fans repeatedly noticed that V seemed unusually attentive to those small personal details about the members. And over time, that habit became one of the clearest signs the group's bond went beyond professional teamwork. V has always been described by the members as emotionally observant, sometimes in unexpected ways. In interviews and behind-the-scenes content, he frequently referenced things another member mentioned casually months earlier. One member feeling tired, another preferring certain foods during stressful schedules, someone acting quieter than usual. V often picked up on changes before they were openly discussed. The important part is consistency. These moments appeared repeatedly across years of content without being highlighted dramatically. During travel shows like Bon Voyage and In the Soup, V regularly prepared things specifically suited to another member's preferences without being asked directly. Sometimes it was choosing food someone liked, other times it involved adjusting activities based on another member's mood or energy level. Fans especially noticed how naturally he remembered emotional details.
In psychology, this kind of selective memory often signals strong attachment because emotionally important relationships cause the brain to prioritize personal information automatically. BTS members spent their late adolescence and adulthood together under unusually intense conditions, which strengthened emotional awareness inside the group over time. One revealing example happened during live stream conversations when V referenced older moments another member barely remembered himself. The reaction was often surprise, followed by laughter, because the details seemed too minor for anyone else to store mentally, yet V retained it anyway. Another moment widely discussed among fans occurred when he noticed subtle emotional shifts in members during interviews and immediately adjusted the atmosphere by joking, redirecting conversation, or physically moving closer to them. Those reactions looked spontaneous because they were. V's attentiveness also became visible during difficult periods. BTS openly discussed emotional exhaustion and burnout multiple times throughout documentaries and interviews. During those moments, V frequently checked on members quietly instead of making public emotional statements. In backstage footage, he was sometimes seen sitting beside exhausted members silently or initiating small interactions to lighten tense atmospheres. Again, nothing theatrical, just attention. Family dynamics often work exactly this way, care expressed through accumulated knowledge of another person's habits over long periods. Another powerful example came from Jungkook. Multiple BTS members mentioned over the years that V looked after Jungkook carefully during their younger years together, especially emotionally. Since Jungkook debuted extremely young, older members naturally became protective figures around him. V's relationship with Jungkook stood out partly because of how well he understood Jungkook's emotional patterns, even during quieter moments. Fans noticed V often recognized when Jungkook needed encouragement before words were spoken directly. RM once described BTS as people who know each other's smallest habits after living together for so long. V embodied that reality constantly. During cooking content, he remembered exactly how members preferred certain foods prepared. During games, he anticipated reactions before they happened. During emotional conversations, he often reacted to subtle facial expressions instantly. That level of familiarity only develops through years of shared daily life. One detail that made fans emotional repeatedly was how naturally BTS members trusted V's observations. If he mentioned someone seemed tired or stressed, others usually accepted it immediately rather than dismissing him. That trust revealed a long-established emotional understanding inside the group. Another striking moment happened during In the Soup when V quietly prepared activities or conversations around members' comfort levels rather than focusing on himself. Viewers described the atmosphere as less like celebrities filming content and more like longtime brothers spending time together naturally after years of coexistence. The emotional realism of those moments mattered because they looked unscripted, and after years of watching BTS together, many fans realized the group's strongest proof of brotherhood never came from speeches, it came from memory, the kind only people who genuinely care continue carrying for years. But one member showed the deepest family instinct of all through a habit so natural the others barely noticed it anymore.
Number 1. Jungkook. The strongest proof that BTS functions like family may be hidden inside one incredibly simple habit. They wait for each other. Airports, stage entrances, cars leaving schedules, meals, elevators, backstage hallways. Over and over again, BTS members instinctively slow down until everyone is together before moving forward. And no member revealed how deeply this habit mattered more than Jungkook. Jungkook entered BTS as the youngest member while still a teenager. The older members often described him as someone they helped raise during the group's early years because he spent most of his adolescence beside them instead of living a normal teenage life. Over time, Jungkook developed habits that reflected that emotional dependence clearly. One of the most noticeable was how often he physically stayed close to the group during movement-heavy schedules. Fans repeatedly observed that Jungkook rarely rushed ahead alone, even when crowds separated the members temporarily. Instead, he frequently paused automatically until everyone regrouped. It sounds tiny, but psychologically, it reveals collective attachment behavior, common in close family systems. Humans unconsciously synchronize movement patterns when emotional bonds become deeply ingrained. BTS demonstrated this constantly in public spaces. During airport footage, for example, members often slowed walking speed for whoever lagged behind. Jungkook especially showed this instinct during chaotic travel schedules, where security, cameras, and fans created pressure. Instead of focusing only on himself, he regularly checked where the others were before continuing forward. One widely discussed moment showed Jungkook pausing near a vehicle entrance until another member safely reached the car, despite staff trying to move schedules quickly. Nobody announced it, nobody turned it into emotional content. It simply happened naturally. That naturalness is exactly why it mattered. The habit became even more visible during concerts and award shows. Before stage entrances, BTS members frequently gathered together physically rather than entering separately whenever possible. Jungkook often looked toward the group instinctively before moving into position. In documentaries like Burn the Stage and Break the Silence, the members repeatedly emphasized how emotionally difficult solo pressure could become during global fame. Yet, despite individual success, BTS maintained unusually strong group-oriented behavior patterns. Jungkook reflected that dynamic constantly. Another revealing detail appeared during meals and casual content. BTS members often waited until everyone received food before starting seriously themselves. Jungkook especially mirrored this behavior during live streams and travel programs. Sometimes he literally paused eating while distracted members returned to the table. Again, tiny action, but family bonds are often built from repetitive small behaviors rather than dramatic declarations. One emotional example happened during backstage footage after exhausting performances. Members were physically drained, barely speaking, yet still moved collectively instead of individually. Jungkook repeatedly stayed near older members while transitioning between schedules, almost like the group remained psychologically connected, even under fatigue. Fans noticed because the behavior never disappeared, not during rookie years, not during world tours, not even after becoming one of the most famous music groups on Earth. Another important layer comes from Jungkook's own words. Over the years, he openly admitted that the BTS members shaped most of his growth as a person because he entered the industry so young. He once explained that spending more than a decade beside the members influenced nearly every part of his adulthood. That history explains why separation habits inside BTS feel emotionally different from ordinary coworker relationships. The group did not simply work together, they matured together during the most formative years of their lives. Jungkook's instinct to remain connected physically to the group became visible evidence of that shared history. Even during solo projects and independent schedules, the members consistently referenced checking on each other privately, meeting often, and maintaining communication outside official promotions. BTS survived industry pressure that destroys many long-running groups. Financial uncertainty, injuries, military enlistments, global scrutiny, creative burnout, and non-stop public attention. Yet the small habits remained unchanged, waiting for one another, protecting each other, feeding each other, sitting quietly together, remembering details nobody else notices. In the end, BTS never really needed to call themselves family constantly. Their routines already proved it long ago.